Welcome to the Rich Report, a podcast with news and information on the world of big data. Today my guest is from Jaspersoft. They're makers of business intelligence software, of course. Mike Boyarski, I want to welcome you back to the show.
Great. Thanks, Rich. It's great to be here.
Well, thanks. Last time we talked, you had kind of an interesting inverted big data strategy of starting at the end, but we didn't talk much about what Jaspersoft brings to the table. So I thought today maybe we just go through your slides and find out more. That sound good?
Yeah, that sounds great. So Jaspersoft is, as you mentioned, is a business intelligence provider. We've been in the open source world of business intelligence since the inception, and that has really caused us to be put into a segment of BI that's quite interesting and, in fact, growing tremendously, and that's called embedded analytics. So today's presentation, we're going to talk about embedded analytics. Why is it becoming so popular? What's driving these new sort of types of deployments for BI? And then, of course, along the way, we'll talk a little bit about what Jaspersoft offers within this space. So if we get on into the presentation, we'll start with the crux of the problem. So there's software providers. A lot of our customers are software companies, folks that are building software solutions, whether those are sold externally as a commercial application or built internally to be used by a large organization. Most of these providers are trying to hit the bullseye, if you will, when it comes to prepackaged reports and dashboards for their customers. And the reason why they're providing these reports and dashboards within their application is they're just providing additional information about that application, trying to format that information so it's easy for that user to consume and understand. The problem with this, if we get to the next slide, is that more often than not, those packaged reports, those dashboards that are part of that application, they ultimately miss the mark for customers. Everyone has a slightly different, maybe, question they're trying to answer. Maybe the view that they are looking at has changed, and that prepackaged result, albeit was intended to be good and beneficial, really doesn't ultimately drive the best value for that end user. So this is where we get to the next slide, which is talking about embedded analytics. Embedded analytics is really the answer to this problem, which is providing a free accessibility to that data that's inside that application, delivered in a very intuitive, visual way, so that you can unlock new insights and opportunities for the end users of that application. And that's what it's all about for embedded analytics, is delivering better, faster insight to that application data so that person, that individual, can make better, faster decisions. So let's drill in and get into the crux of the presentation, which is about describing what is embedded analytics, what's sort of the drivers behind it, and then we'll talk about some embedded analytics solutions from Jaspersoft. I don't know if we'll have time for embedded demo today, so in fact, I probably shouldn't have included that bullet point here, but that is certainly part of the solution that we can offer. So if we go to the next slide, what is embedded analytics? I took this quote from one of my favorite BI analysts, Wayne Eckerson, of the BI Leadership Research Group. He claims it in very simple terms that embedded analytics is when you build BI functionality into the fabric of operational applications and processes that drive the business on a daily basis. And historically, for those that have followed the BI market for many years, we used to call this operational intelligence. And the reason why we did that is because data was assigned or part of an operational decision. So this means that on a minute by minute or hour by hour or day by day basis, you're taking information from that application. It's presented to you so that you can act on it. So they always called that or put that, described that as operational intelligence. Embedded analytics is really just the next generation of what we would call operational intelligence. And the core functionality that these applications provide is really presenting data in an interactive way. So interactive reports and dashboards so that the users can really understand and consume that information. There's interactive visual analysis that's really exploring data versus just seeing a static view of that information that's been presented by maybe somebody else that guesses or thinks that you want a particular view of that data. What if analysis? So that allows an end user to say, well, if I do X or Y, what will happen to my customer or to my process? And that what if analysis is very dynamic and interactive. And then ultimately the goal is to be self-service enabled, that you can begin to build your own queries, your own insights without asking for help. And that's the ultimate goal for embedded analytics, and that's really sort of the next frontier for this category of solution. And then the next category is how. So embedded techniques is really how do you present the reports, the dashboards, the visualizations inside your application. And there's a variety of ways that you can do it. We see about these are three common techniques that we see. Contextual integration really means that literally within the application UI that there might be a little portal of data, a little visualization that's literally presented right next to the workflow that you're working on. Maybe as you're talking to a customer, you can see how often they've visited your website or how many tickets they have open. The integrated function is a very popular technique. This is really considered sort of the traditional way, which is just envision you're working within an application and there's a little, on the top of the menu navigation, a report tab. And you pull that report tab and there's all these pre-built reports and dashboards. We call that an integrated functional solution, and it's a very common approach. And then there's the decoupled bundle, which is really the way to integrate BI as part of an application, but not actually have it as part of the application per se. It's sort of a separate application UI. It's sort of literally and physically a separate tool. And this is really sort of that prior generation of embedded BI, something that's becoming less popular and less useful for users. So if we move on to the next slide, what's the drivers for embedded analytics? And it really encompasses these three categories. There's people, there's business, and there's technology drivers. So we'll spend a little bit of time on each one of these. On the next slide, we see the people side of the drivers. So the consumerization of enterprise software is a reality. We all recognize that whether it's bringing your own device into the workplace to use, whether it's you're using Google Docs or Gmail or whatever personal tools that you may use for your outside of work, those tools are coming into the market, into the enterprise, and the reason is that you become more productive, and they're also very easy to use. And so this is ultimately what end users want. They want to be able to serve their customers better. They want to be able to bring in external information. If they're using a CRM system, they want to use LinkedIn data. They want to use social media feeds to help augment and supplement the view of their customer. Well, and that's the same drivers for embedded analytics, that they want to be able to know more about their customer at the moment of engagement in real time so that they are the most up-to-date and they're very intelligent about what they're communicating to these customers. And so that's really what's ultimately trying to drive the use of embedded analytics is better self-service with either your customers, whether those are internal or external, also being more quick and actionable so that when you see an insight that you can actually act on it more quickly because it's presented to you in the right place at the right time. And independence is ultimately what's driving all of this consumerization effort. People don't like to have to code IT or an expert to get their job done. Everyone wants to be able to do what they can independently when they can. The work-from-home model is very popular. And a lot of times you just don't have the ability to pick up the phone and call IT to help with your particular request. You can be much more agile if you can do it on your own. So independence is really ultimately one of the key drivers for embedded analytics. And the closed-loop decision-making is really the nirvana for business intelligence providers. To be able to see something data-driven, a report, a metric, and then act on it immediately is where the ultimate goal for BI and the ultimate value that you can get from that tool. So closed loop is really sort of the ultimate benefit for embedded analytics. If we go to the next slide, we'll talk about business benefits. And this is sort of, at the end of the day, what are the corporate drivers for embedded analytics? And it really comes down to optimizing. Optimizing, if you're a big organization and you've got a well-defined process, you can track and measure and manage that process and see where the outliers are, where the inefficiencies are, and quickly act on those in real time. So one of the big sort of undercurrent benefits of embedded analytics is the real-time nature of the action. The fact that this is typically a tool that's running 24/7. It's not something that is typically a batch process that runs, every 24 hours or once a week, and then you read your report and then you think about making a decision. We're talking about real-time decision-making that's happening throughout the course of a day or a week. So optimizing that business process quickly is ultimately a huge benefit. There's also additional revenue opportunities when you to look at for example, the sales process. If you're talking to a customer and you're noticing behavior that opens the door for adding on an additional service or adding on additional module to that sale, that's where actionable insight becomes a reality. Specifically when you're talking about a sales process or a service process. Competitive advantage, we are all competing on information. That's the reality, and the winners are those that can do it most effectively. So embedded analytics is when you're really taking that insight and putting it to the front lines of your user community, whether that's a sales or support or even a product planning process. To be able to use that data quickly and efficiently is really where competitive advantage rises. And then customer satisfaction, of course, shouldn't be at the bottom, of course, so these aren't rank ordered, but that's ultimately a huge benefit. There's a lot of organizations today that really pride themselves on service. Customer service is becoming a feature, if you will, to many organizations. And what better way to provide the best possible service than measuring it and measuring a customer's activity and their happiness, whether that's based on their social feeds and engagement or based on the activity that they're using within your overall application ecosystem. So then the next slide, we'll talk a little bit about technology. So this is really actually one of the what I think is one of the biggest drivers, is because the ability to integrate embedded analytics has never been easier and never been more cost effective. The fact is that data is being collected at a faster, more cost-effective rate than ever before. And this is only going to continue to be driven lower and be easier to maintain. So the fact that we're collecting a lot of data opens the door to being able to use that data for better insight. There's also some great tools and technologies around caching. Caching is important because when you're embedding something inside your operational application, there's a lot of stuff going on underneath the covers. There's a lot of plumbing that's required. The queries that are going against that data need to be quick and efficient, but they can't slow down the application to do its day-to-day job. So there's a lot of great techniques, in-memory engines and caching algorithms that help make that performance sing without slowing down the application and also slowing down the insight for the end user. Web standards is another driver. The fact that things are much more open, pluggable, mashable. That's the big benefit for web applications, and the fact that many applications are now being built in the cloud. There's a nimbleness and agility that you get from being able to mush together, if you will, data from various sources and present that in a limitless number of ways. So these are sort of the high-level technology drivers, and there's, of course, many others underneath this, but these are sort of the main categories that are changing that dynamic. So if we go to the next slide, there's sort of a last piece about the drivers, and that's the application vendors themselves. We service many application vendors on a day-to-day basis, and they're coming to us because of they're being forced to, and they're being forced to deliver better analytics inside their application than ever before. The reality is that maybe 10 years ago, you could get away with providing a static report, maybe 5 to 10 canned reports in your application. You'd ship that to your customer, and you could kind of get away with that. Ultimately, what the customer would do is if those reports didn't work for them, they'd figure out that problem themselves. They would go to their own BI tool that they have in-house, or they would run their own queries behind the scenes. Well, that's no longer a dynamic that works for most customers. They want more. They want action. They want insight within that application, and they want it now. And they don't feel compelled to build that themselves. So a lot of app vendors are now being forced for competitive reasons to deliver a more engaging, more analytic service within their application. This reduces those custom report requests. I mean, at the end of the day, who's going to build that custom report request? If that customer comes to that app vendor and says, I want this report with this layout and with this chart type, that developer ultimately is going to have to build that report. And they're building that report instead of building a new feature that makes that application do something better and more effective for that end user. So it's really a win-win for the application vendors. They can get out of the business of writing BI requests and get into the business of continuing to innovate on their application. Improving the app stickiness is a big benefit as well. That application then becomes more of that end user's process than just automating a workflow. It can become an analytic process for that organization as well. And that means that application is going to be used by potentially more people for longer. So that's a big benefit for that application. And then we see commonly a lot of customers adding on analytic services as an additional bolt-on, a module or fee to that application. And that's something that's becoming more popular, especially for those more advanced analytic requirements. And ultimately, what you're trying to do as an app vendor is keep your customers happy, keep them engaged, satisfy their requirements so that they continue to renew and use your application year after year. So if we go to the next slide, we'll drill into a little bit on those technology drivers. And these are sort of what I see as the 5 sort of main capabilities. And these are all services that, of course, Jaspersoft enables. And it's something that as you're looking at a BI vendor for embedded analytics, you kind of want to keep an eye on these core capabilities. The in-memory engine is a big part of improving the performance of the queries that are presented to the customer. So when they're viewing that dashboard or viewing that report or that analytic view, that's not slow as an experience, and it's also not hampering the underlying operational application. It needs to be efficient and query very effectively. The multi-tenancy is an architecture that's very wildly popular for SaaS-based applications. And really, when you talk about today's applications, they're typically built in the cloud, hosted by that application vendor, and so that the fact that BI tool should also be a multi-tenant application so that it fits into the architecture of that SaaS hosted application. It's just more efficient and more cost-effective to do it that way. The next area is data access. There's different types of data that's coming online. It's no longer a relational database world. I've come from Oracle, and that was the sort of the standard. Everything was in a relational model. And now with the new types of data sources and the cost effectiveness and the advantages of things like Hadoop and MongoDB and Cassandra and others, really there's all different types of structure of data. And your BI tool needs to be able to connect to those seamlessly. They shouldn't have to move that data around into some other relational schema to make those queries. If you want, you should be able to do those queries directly against those source systems. So data access, data connectivity is a big attribute to embedded analytics. The fact also is that the API-driven platform is very important, because when you think about plugging in or mashing up a BI service with your application, you want control to be able to put that portlet or that widget, that little chart, exactly where you want it to be within the application. You don't want to be encumbered by the BI platform and have to force it into your application or rewrite your application just to make it fit in that presentation layer. So the API-driven platform is a very big, important piece to the BI platform, and the fact that it should be REST-based, because REST is it's the sort of becoming the standard for web applications in terms of access, specifically when we talk about mobile access, and the fact that mobile delivery needs to be very not chatty, if you will, and needs to perform quite well. So REST-based API, very important. It's something that Jaspersoft provides out of the box. And then the last piece is just the UI rebranding. If you do want to use your BI vendor's UI, you should be able to completely rescan and rebrand that so it looks like your application. So that's also another huge benefit of Jaspersoft, is that we use web standards like HTML and CSS so that when you do that rebranding, it's easy. You're not having to fly in a consultant, make all these customizations, and then when it's time to upgrade your application, you got to bring that person back and do all those customizations again. Should be web standard, easy to do. So if we go to the next slide, very quickly, the Jaspersoft pitch or value proposition is that we want to be and continue to view ourselves as the intelligence inside company. We want to make your application smarter. We want to make your users of your application more competitive and more intelligent. So we're focused on self-service tools in the form of interactive reports, dashboards, and analytic views, encompassing all of that in a embeddable architecture. And we want to be able to deliver that so that it's ultimately more cost-effective and affordable for your business. So these are the three tenets of our solution, and this allows us today to power millions of people to make better decisions using Jaspersoft. And often they never know that they're actually using Jaspersoft. It's part of an application. They don't even realize that that report or that dashboard or that analytic view is actually being powered by the Jaspersoft platform. And we're good with that because ultimately that's the ultimate benefit and compliment is the fact that people don't know they're using Jaspersoft for their day-to-day business. On the next slide, the world of embedded analytics is changing based on the application profiles out there. We support a number of different application types. Applications come in all shapes and sizes. There's commercial applications like Red Hat's virtualization software solution. There's customer portals. These are used internally in most cases by a group, or it's a customer-facing portal. It means that that data is being published to clients of, for example, Verizon or SunGard, and that data is ultimately helping their end customers be smarter and more effective. There's cloud applications. These are sort of the modern-day applications that are running today. In the case of Virgin Money, this is a charitable organization that uses our application and allows charities to manage their business, the collection of funds, and their distribution of funds using embedded analytics. And then there's, of course, the internal apps and big data analytics, which kind of round out the different types of apps that we support. So really, applications are everywhere. They're in all shapes and sizes, and ultimately BI is part of all of those. It's no longer just for commercial applications. It's for any type of app, whether that's external to the organization or internal. And then the next slide, we just talk about what embedded analytics means. So what does it look like? So there's reports that you can run from your application. This is sort of what we would consider the first generation of embedded analytics. It's very simple, but very effective and very popular. On the next slide, we look at interactive dashboards. So this is really where the next sort of step in embedded analytics is going, where you have a series of charts and information elements to display to customers and allows them to view their business in a holistic view on one page. And so ultimately, this is sort of what we view as sort of the next step in embedded analytics. However, on the next slide, this is the Nirvana, which is allowing somebody to go from an interactive dashboard or report to full-on analysis, to explore the data, to ask additional questions of the data without having to ask for help. So we have a full interactive analytics suite that allows you to use visual charts and graphs to explore your data and be unencumbered by doing that. You don't have to ask for help because really, ultimately, the UI should be intuitive enough and the display of that information should be simple enough that it makes sense. And then the next slide is about connecting to data. And so Jaspersoft is very well versed in connecting to a variety of types of data, whether it's traditional relational, whether it's big data, whether it's even flat files, custom files that are part of a homegrown application sort of infrastructure. We have a connectivity layer that allows you to connect to all of these, and you can do it in a very cheap and effective way. So that's ultimately what a big part of the embedded story is, that data comes from a variety of places. In some cases, it's from a legacy architecture that was built many years ago, or maybe it's part of a new engine like MongoDB is becoming a very popular sort of embedded engine for different types of applications. So you want to be able to connect to all of those without having to plug in other types of solutions. And then on the next slide, you want to ultimately, once you connect and build those reports, you want them to be delivered inside your application. So these are two examples of some of our customers and where they're presenting a full-featured BI solution, but inside their application. It's been fully rebranded. It doesn't look like Jaspersoft. It looks like the resident application. And if you click on the next view, you can see this is a nice interactive mashup, if you will, of using Google Maps with selected key metrics to display a particular process. This is a great example from eBuilder where it's a really immersive, engaging, interactive experience that allows the manager of this process to really understand what's going on with their business. And they don't have to be a BI expert to use this part of that application. It makes sense to them because the data makes sense to them and the way it's presented to them is very intuitive, and that's the ultimate win with embedded analytics. The next and final slide is really just sort of wrapping up the embedded analytics service, in this case used by Jaspersoft. We want that experience to be extremely intuitive. So we're really focused on allowing the interaction with the data to be fluid and seamless. We want to use componentry that is web standard, so HTML5 visualization, so that you can use that tool on a tablet device or desktop, and there's really no concerns for the application vendor. It will work. We want to be able to deliver the interactivity in a very fast, effective way using our in-memory engine, and ultimately connect to anything. So connecting to data, a very big part of the overall story and solution for embedded analytics. So this is sort of a narrative on what embedded analytics is, why it's becoming, what are some of the drivers, and then ultimately what are some of the technology elements of the solution from a BI vendor perspective. And of course, a little bit of an overview of what Jaspersoft provides for those that are investigating or looking to invest in embedded analytics. So, Rich, that's my overview, if you will. So, I guess at this point, are there any questions?
Oh, sure. Thanks for that, Mike. First question, you mentioned how this kind of grew out of operational intelligence. When was the first mention of embedded analytics that you're aware of?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think over, the last 5 to 6 years, I think we've been seeing sort of a transition happening from operational intelligence to embedded analytics. I don't know when a formal handoff took place with that definition. It has probably a lot to do with the marketing organizations of some of the larger vendors out there in the marketplace. I know, when you look at some of the acquisitions that were made by, for example, Oracle and SAP, they made big bets on BI tools for very good reasons. But they were also, at the end of the day, those were software vendors that had applications that they were selling to their customers, and they recognized the need to not only sell traditional or decoupled BI, but also they could embed that BI capability inside their applications to provide better value to their customers. So I think there's just been a sort of a gradual recognition that embedded analytics is a big benefit, and I think it was probably just a momentum of using the term by a variety of vendors, and so we've sort of retired the operational intelligence, although I think a few folks at Gartner aren't ready for that official sunsetting of the term, but embedded analytics is sort of the new term.
Yeah, and I have to admit, I've had some hands-on with tools that look like this. I use MailChimp for my bulk mailer, and it gives me all kinds of charts that show me the world distribution and who clicked. And it's almost become to me like this is almost expected, because I use Cloudflare to see how my site is doing, and it has a similar kind of embedded analytics interface. Do you see this proliferating?
Yeah, well, it's funny because you're absolutely right. We've just expected it. We don't even question it anymore. You can't even watch a football game without being inundated with data, right? So there's all sorts of stuff being presented, and we don't even think about it. Like, 10 years ago, you might have gotten the halftime statistics from at a football game, and now you're getting real-time data with, splashed all across the screen. And yes, that's happening within our consumer web application world, and it's surprising that the enterprise application it's always been a laggard in terms of innovation. Consumer web apps seem to be always innovating much more quickly. I mean, Mint.com, a great service or tool for managing your personal finances, and a lot of that's driven by the UI and the display of information using charts and graphs. And people, tend to use that to manage their finances very effectively. So yes, I think without a doubt, because of the visual sort of force that's going on within the BI market right now, the visual analysis is a very intuitive way to see insight, and because it's becoming easier to mash up that sort of visual with your application, you're going to start seeing it more and more within the operational enterprise context. But as you know, change within enterprise applications, unfortunately, is kind of slow going. So
yeah.
You've got the advantage of being, part of you've got some tools there that are a little bit more modern and ahead of the curve.
Yeah, Mike. So this, I don't know if this is a fair question or not, but what to what degree is the Jaspersoft offering for customers? Is it more of a window, an easy way to look at things they're already doing, or is it an all new approach?
Well, so there's nothing wrong with using business intelligence tools to make sure what you're doing is tracking, is part of the defined boundaries of that particular process, and so day-to-day sort of maintenance of a process using our tool is I think a huge benefit. In fact, I think there's a need for describing different flavors and types of BI. There's strategic use of BI where if I'm a product company and I want to predict what's going to happen next year based on trends that have occurred over the last 10 or 5, there's a lot of different types of tools and technologies you need to answer that question. But if you want to answer the what's happening, what just happened 5 minutes ago and how is that going to affect what's going to happen in the next hour, depending on, of course, the type of data that you're working with and the volume of that data, you could have a totally different set of tools to answer those questions. And I think we tend to think that in the BI space as vendors that you have one tool that does everything. And I don't think that's the case anymore. I think people are recognizing that there's a tool for sort of operational, tactical, day-to-day decision-making. And then there's another set of tools for looking at your overall corporate enterprise and all the data that you have under house. And how is that data going to be harnessed to help me from a strategic perspective and planning perspective? And so we are okay being, a part of a day-to-day business process because that process, if tweaked and tuned on an hourly or daily basis, even a weekly basis, can add benefit and help improve the performance of that organization. So yeah, we're okay being part of the day-to-day use of intelligence, and certainly we are used in some cases for planning and strategy purposes, but there's also different types of tools that do different things for that type of operation.
Yeah. Well, kind of a wrap-up question here, Mike. How easy is it to kick the tires on this Jaspersoft software and see if it's right for me?
Yeah, we've got a variety of ways to do that. There's a 30-day evaluation download from our website that gives you all of our capabilities, and you can download it locally. There's also a hosted trial, so you can sign up. It's already a sort of a ready-to-go instance of our tool with some sample data. That's really good for somebody that just really wants to get a quick feel for the UI and how it behaves and works, and you get that for a couple days. And then if you really want to have it play with your own data, you can also use our Amazon service. So we've worked with Amazon, and you can connect to, if you've got RDS as a service, for example, you can use our full solution, our BI professional solution, against that RDS data for pennies on the dollar. So it's really a rental service. You pay as you go, and it's an hourly based service, and you can turn it on and off, and it's really sort of the next frontier for VI is to be more consumption oriented around your needs, not necessarily, today's model is you buy it for the year and hopefully you use it every day within that year. Pay as you go seems to be a little bit more cost effective for customers. So that's also kind of another way to use our tool with your own data for a small period of time for a small fee.
Well, terrific. Well, Mike Boyarski, I want to thank you once again for coming on the show today.
Yeah, I appreciate it, Rich. Really, hopefully this is helpful for those that are looking at and learning about embedded analytics.
Well, absolutely. So, okay, folks, that's it for the Rich Report. Stay tuned for more news and information on the world of big data.